Apprenons l'anglais en contexte. There is a controversial theory of the language of the soul. The soul, l'âme. You know?
Yeah.
Where do you feel more comfortable in your mind? Spanish or English?
Well, I'd disagree with that in the sense that I feel bilingual, if that makes sense. I always thought I must probably not speak each language really well because I could, like with my sisters, I speak Spanglish.
This theory is against perfect bilingualism. They believe it doesn't exist as a concept. There is one that predominates.
I'd slip constantly.
To slip signifie littéralement glisser, mais dans ce contexte, c'est passer d'une langue à une autre.
I'd slip constantly between English and Spanish, and I thought that was a sign that I wasn't completely fluent in either of them. However, I did read once an article that said, like, when that happens, it means that you are bilingual. Like, you're seeing both languages as one.
Right.
So the route that your brain takes doesn't have to make an effort to stop and think of a word. It's more like it automatically accesses either of them.
Either of them, ou en anglais britannique, either of them, c'est ni l'un ni l'autre. Mais dans ce contexte, c'est l'un ou l'autre.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I used to always be asked, like, what language do you dream in? What do you, feel more comfortable with? And I think it's more based on the context.
Right.
Like, depending who I talk to, like, obviously my parents had only speak English. It would be very weird to speak to them in Spanish.
Weird. Étrange.
But even, like, with my work colleagues, if I sometimes speak to them in a different language than I would normally do, then that would be weird.
Right. And what are some of the major differences between both cultures? Spanish culture, the British culture. I've been around for nearly 5 years now.
Yeah.
I know Spanish people are probably I would say maybe happier, when I look at, the party life here and then their philosophy of life.
Yeah.
Pretty laid back. Laid back. Décontracté. Ce terme décrit les personnes qui ne se mettent pas beaucoup de pression, qui ne s'inquiètent généralement pas du comportement des autres ou des choses à faire. Pretty laid back as well. Not always the same thing in the UK, right?
I suppose it's more like cultural difference. Like how we'd be defining happiness or how it's expressed is completely different in every culture.
Definitely.
So you have made a point there, like how the British culture might be more like, I don't know if the word is to shut down.
To be shut down, c'est être fermé en parlant de la personnalité.
The British culture might be more like, I don't know if the word is to shut down or bottle up more.
To bottle up, c'est littéralement embouteiller. Mais dans ce contexte, ça sera se renfermer sur soi-même.
Or bottle up more. I do believe so, in that sense, like you do maybe not show so much like anger or like there may be certain feelings that might be considered more inappropriate or, generally speaking in that sense. Spanish people are more open in all senses, like, the more affectionate, maybe more touchy.
Touchy, tactile.
But also when it comes to expressing emotions, they're more open to that too.
I was impressed by the warmth, la chaleur of Spanish people.
Yeah.
I mean, in most other places around here in Europe, it's common for the locals to be kind of phlegmatic. Phlegmatic. Ce mot décrit les personnes qui ont une disposition non émotionnelle et solidement calme. Par exemple, les Britanniques sont connus pour leur caractère phlegmatique. Phlegmatic.
Yeah.
I like British people. I love them, right? No stereotype, nothing. Basically talking about cultural differences.
Yeah.
As of today, in terms of your social interaction, on which side do you stand? De quel côté te situes-tu?
I'd be in between.
Je suis entre les deux.
Because like what you're mentioning, like my English family would mention how affectionate I was, and I wouldn't consider myself, like, compared to my Spanish friends, I do like respect distances more. I'm definitely not touchy. So I feel like depending where I am, I may seem more in one way than another.
Right. And then you studied psychology.
Yeah.
And you've become a psychologist.
That's right, yeah.
And what do you deal with? To deal with signifie contextuellement traiter. What do you deal with specifically? Mental issues?
Yeah, well, the idea is I studied psychology and I thought I'd just work here in Madrid. However, what I was surprised to encounter is...
Encounter, rencontrer. Dans ce contexte, on dira découvrir.
What I was surprised to encounter is there's a huge community of English-speaking expats. So the fact that I could speak English was a great opportunity to work with expats.
Right.
So, I mean, people typically think, like, to go to therapy, you have to be, like, chronically depressed or suffering with extreme anxiety, panic attacks. But in fact, like, anyone go to therapy, and that's fine. Like, it's just to navigate normal daily issues.
Faire face aux problèmes quotidiens.
Just to navigate normal daily issues that we can all learn tools and benefit from. But specifically expats would benefit even more because there's not just like the daily struggles, but there's the added stressor of culture clash, not knowing the language, being away from family and friends and relationships or partners if that's the case. So it can be a very lonely stage.
Lonely, solitaire.
You know, obviously there's the high when you arrive and, you know, feeling like all the novelty. But once homesickness...
Homesickness, le mal du pays.
But once homesickness starts kicking in...
To kick in, c'est frapper, mais dans ce contexte, on dira se faire ressentir.
And you're away from all your support and your friendships here might be, you know, a bit more meaningless.
Meaningless, sans intérêt.
A bit more meaningless or not as close. Therapy can be a brilliant place there to help you find your direction.
You've been working here as a psychologist and then you've built a company.
Yeah, that's right. In March this year, in fact, so it's only just been 4 months. I set up my own clinical practice with my 2 colleagues, Lydia and Tasso. We set up our company, Open Psychology, because we'd been working, in their case, for 10 years, in my case, just over 7 years, specifically with expats. And we realized that, you know, there is a huge community that do need the support. And it's sometimes maybe hard to find. Like, you know, therapy's out there for sure. Then there are psychologists that also speak English. But that added, you know, having experienced living in different cultures or having lived abroad, that's an important element to the mix too.
C'est un élément important du mélange.
Like, to fully understand what you're going through, I feel is really important too.
Okay. While processing, to process, c'est traiter. Ici, on dira procéder à. While processing the transition of social integration in a different country, different culture, what are some of the main challenges faced as you're in the field? To be in the field, être du domaine, être sur le terrain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just like in any relationships, there can be hiccups.
Hiccup, c'est littéralement le hoquet, la contraction du diaphragme qui produit un appel d'air sonore. Mais au sens figuré, ce mot désigne les embûches, les difficultés.
Just like in any relationships, there can be hiccups, right? But again, with the culture clash and the language barrier, there are more misunderstandings, expectations and assumptions.
Assumptions, les hypothèses.
Expectations and assumptions may take control of certain situations and make, just any small disagreements be more intensified maybe. So yeah, we can navigate situations from obviously like misunderstandings at work, with friendships, but obviously couples therapy, particularly in a bicultural marriage, is really beneficial to go to therapy in that sense, to learn, on the one hand, obviously understanding why each one acts, or, you know, what the underlying reasons.
Underlying reasons, les raisons sous-jacentes, profondes.
What the underlying reasons or what triggers each one.
To trigger, déclencher.
But also the cultural side. Particularly, obviously, thinking in like parenting, that's when differences can be really heightened.
Heightened, accentué.
But being able to understand, like, no culture is better than the other. It's just a different way of doing things. Sometimes just being able to see the other person's point of view, see where it's coming from, can already, relieve a lot and take a lot of pressure off.
Right. Well, you don't have to answer this question if you're bound by professional secrecy.
Yeah.
What is the most commonly faced issue? Et voilà, pour plus de contenu, abonnez-vous et activez la cloche de notification. À présent, essayez de faire un bref résumé de la conversation dans les commentaires pour évaluer votre compréhension. J'ai conçu un outil de pratique qui vous permettra d'être en contact au quotidien avec la langue anglaise. Vous aurez l'occasion de vous enregistrer, d'écouter votre voix, mais aussi d'obtenir un feedback, des corrections, tantôt au niveau de la grammaire que du vocabulaire, des activités de listening bien structurées et départagées en fonction des niveaux. Tout cela en plus des séances interactives en direct que vous aurez avec moi à travers la pratique de l'oral et l'écoute constante. Vous pourrez réaliser enfin ce rêve longtemps nourri de passer à un niveau supérieur de fluidité en anglais. Je vous laisse tous les détails en description et en commentaire. Let's get into it.